Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all of you to Mass this morning. Welcome to any visitors worshiping with us today, and welcome to all of you joining us remotely this morning through Facebook, YouTube, and the radio. It's great to be with you. In a couple of days, my niece Katerina is going to be turning 13. And for a little girl of her age, she's been through an awful lot. At just 13 years old, she's already had 3 open heart surgeries. She had the first one when she was 3 months old, the second when she was 4 years old, and the third just this past October. And the reason she's had to have all those surgeries is because she has a hole in her heart. She was born with a rare condition where her internal organs are flipped, and they're all in the opposite side of where they usually are. And part of that condition is having a hole in your heart. So that's why she's had to have all these open heart surgeries. Now, when people find out about her condition and all that she's been through, in their kindness, they're very quick to offer their sympathies for all that she's been through. And sometimes people will even come up to me and offer me sympathy about my niece's condition and all that she's been through. To which I like to respond, "Thank you very much for your sympathy. But do you realize that you have the same condition?" Of course, they look at me confused, so I repeat, "Thank you for your sympathy, but do you realize that you have the same condition?" It's not just my niece who has a hole in her heart. I have a hole in my heart. The person offering sympathy to me has a hole in his or her heart, and all of you listening right now have a hole in your hearts. And I can say that confidently without knowing anything about your personal medical history, because it is a proven fact that every human being who ever lived was born with a hole in their heart. That hole has a definite shape. The shape is God. Every single one of us has a God-shaped hole in our hearts. I had a theology professor who used to love to ask the following question: what do humans and donuts have in common? The answer? They both have a big hole right at the center of their being. The only difference, of course, is that the hole in the donut is shaped like a circle, whereas the hole in the human being is shaped like God. Every single one of us has a God-shaped hole in our hearts. Now, if you have a hole in the ground that's shaped like a circle, and you try to fill it with something shaped like a triangle, a square, or a rectangle, what's going to happen? It's not going to fit, is it? So what do you think is going to happen if you try to fill a God-shaped hole with some shape other than God? It's not going to fit, is it? But do you know that one of the biggest mistakes so many people make in life is that they go through life trying to fill the God-shaped hole in their heart with every shape other than God? Some people make this mistake for 70, 80, or 90 years, even all the way until they die, trying to fill that God-shaped hole with some shape other than God, because they never quite figured out exactly what it was that they were supposed to fill that hole with. So many of you have been coming up to me over the last few weeks and telling me how much you enjoyed our Advent Parish mission. I'm so glad you liked it. It was so rich that everybody seems to have a different takeaway. Can I tell you my biggest takeaway from the parish mission? It was the 3 P's that Father Giuseppe talked about. Do you remember the 3 P's? They stood for power, pleasure, and possessions. And as Father Giuseppe so wisely noted, so many of us make the mistake of going through life trying to fill the God-shaped hole in our hearts with the 3 P's. We chase after power, pleasure, and possessions, thinking they'll make us happy, and when they don't make us happy, we think that only if we could get more of them, then we'd be happy. So we try to get more power, more pleasure, more possessions, but we never end up happy, no matter how much of the 3 P's we get. And why? Because we're trying to fill a God-shaped hole with something other than God. And when you try to fill a God-shaped hole with something other than God, it never fits. This is exactly what Jesus is trying to teach us in today's gospel. In today's gospel from John chapter 1, Jesus asks a very important question. In fact, the question that he asks is the very first thing he says in the Gospel of John. He asks, "What are you looking for?" John the Baptist is standing with two of his disciples. They see Jesus walk by. John points to Jesus and he says, "Behold the Lamb of God." The two disciples decide to follow Jesus. And as they walk behind him, Jesus turns around and looks at them with his piercing eyes and he asks them, "What are you looking for?" Now, Jesus already knows the answer to his question. He knows that they're looking for happiness, which means they're looking for God, which means they're looking for Jesus because Jesus is God. But Jesus is a great teacher, the greatest ever who ever lived. And great teachers know how to ask great questions. So he doesn't just come out and tell them what they're looking for. He asks them a question. What are you looking for? And the correct answer that he's trying to elicit from those two disciples is, "You, Jesus, we're looking for you." And down through the ages, Jesus asks every one of his followers the same question. What are you looking for? And he asks us that question in the hopes that we will realize that in everything we do in life to try to make ourselves happy, we're really just looking for him, because only Jesus can make us happy. I know a guy who learned this lesson not from hearing a priest talk about it in a homily, but from his own real-life experience. This guy's name is Patrick, and he was raised in a Catholic family in Canada. As a young man, Patrick made a big profit by selling his used car to someone at a highly marked price. That big sale was such a huge thrill for him as a young man that he decided to become a used car salesman. He opened a string of used car dealerships, and he became very wealthy very fast. But no matter how much money he made, it was never enough for him. So he just kept striving to make more and more money. He stopped practicing his Catholic faith after his confirmation, and he got so far away from God that when his son came to him one day and asked him if there was a God, Patrick actually took out his wallet, threw a $20 bill on the table, pointed to it, and said to his son, "There, that's God." He got divorced twice and married 3 times, and he had multiple affairs on his various wives. Patrick was working overtime to fill the God-shaped hole in his heart with the 3 Ps, and he was making himself totally miserable in the process. Well, one day, the brother of his 3rd wife, Nancy, sent Nancy a book of messages from the Virgin Mary of Medjugorje. And in case anyone doesn't know, Medjugorje is the little village in Bosnia-Herzegovina where 6 children say that they've been seeing the Virgin Mary since 1981. Nancy had no interest in a book of messages from the Virgin Mary. But as a lapsed Catholic, she didn't quite feel right throwing it out either. So she handed the book to her husband, Patrick, and she dared him to throw it out so it would be on his conscience. Well, something made Patrick open the book, and the first message he read hit him like a ton of bricks. The message read, "I am calling you to conversion for the last time." That was it. Just one sentence. "I am calling you to conversion for the last time." It was a moment of overwhelming grace for Patrick. He felt that Mary was speaking directly to him, and he knew that he had to turn his life around or things were going to end very badly. So he sought out a priest, and he made a confession of his whole bad, sinful life. He met with his bishop, and he found out that his first 2 marriages had not been valid, and so he got validly married to Nancy in the Catholic Church. He went to a Medjugorje conference at the University of Notre Dame, and little by little he began to put Mary's messages into practice in his life. He started praying the rosary every day. He started going to Mass as often as he could, even during the week. He started reading the Bible every day. He started fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays, and he started going to confession at least once a month. And as he put those messages into practice, a joy and a peace entered his soul like he had never experienced in his whole life. His life changed so much that he sold all of his car dealerships and he moved to Medjugorje with his wife, and they used their fortune to build a big house where he and Nancy have been welcoming pilgrims and witnessing to them about God for the last 28 years. I've met Patrick myself several times, and I can tell you that he has so much joy that he talks and laughs at the same time. It's actually kind of annoying, but he can't help but do it because he has so much joy in his heart. Patrick is in his 70s now, and he will gladly tell you that the first half of his life was a living hell, and the second half of his life has been a foretaste of heaven. And why? Because he spent the first half of his life trying to fill the God-shaped hole in his heart with everything but God, and he spent the second half of his life filling that hole with God. And only when you fill that hole with God can you find happiness. Outside of God, there is no true happiness on earth. It's so easy for us to make the same mistake Patrick made in the first half of his life. And you don't have to be some terrible person to make that mistake. In fact, we all make it at some point in our lives. We try to fill that hole in our heart with power, promotions, fancy titles, control over other people. We try to fill that hole in our heart with pleasure, drugs, alcohol, food, sex, pornography. We try to fill that hole in our heart with possessions, a bigger house, a flashier car, gadgets, shopping, and money, which no matter how much we have of it, never seems to be enough. But through the emptiness that always follows the temporary satisfaction that those things bring us, Jesus is right there whispering to us, "What are you looking for?" And every time he asks us that question, he's hoping that it will finally dawn on us that we're really looking for him. A famous theologian named G.K. Chesterton once said, "Every man who ever knocked on the door of a brothel was really just looking for God." You can take out that example and insert any example you want from the 3 Ps. Anytime we look for our ultimate happiness in the things of the world, deep down, we're really just looking for God. Where do you honestly look for the happiness that your heart longs for? In God or in something else? My niece may have a hole in her heart, but so do I, and so do you. And you and I will only find the happiness our hearts are longing for when we finally start filling that hole with God.